The stars were quiet that night, but somewhere deep in the silver clouds of the Velnaran Nebula, a terrible cry broke the silence. It was not a sound of battle or pain, but the endless, heart-piercing cry of a baby, a sound that reached every hall, every mind, and every corner of the royal palace of Queen Serylith of Velnara. The palace itself was a marvel. Floating spires of crystal rose into the stormy skies, glowing faintly in shades of violet and gold. The Velnaran Empire had ruled hundreds of systems, built cities in the clouds, and crushed rebellions without mercy. Yet all that power now meant nothing, for even their mighty queen could not silence her newborn heir. Queen Serylith stood by the child's cradle, a round bed of glowing silk, surrounded by humming machines and alien healers. The baby cried again, a sound that shook the glass walls and made even guards flinch. Serylith's silver eyes closed in pain. "How many cycles?" she asked quietly. The chief healer, a thin alien with blue skin and trembling hands, bowed deeply. 34 cycles, my queen. We have tried every cure known to our kind. The young one's body is healthy, the mind bright. Yet the crying never stops." Serylith turned away. Her armor gleamed under the pale light, but her face showed exhaustion. She had not slept in days. "Then it is not an illness," she said softly. "It is something else." Her voice, once strong enough to command fleets, now carried only sorrow. The sound of her child's cry was not just noise. It was a storm inside her heart. The mighty queen of Velnara, who had fought wars and stood unshaken before enemies, now felt helpless before a tiny infant. When the cry grew louder again, echoing across the palace, she whispered to herself, "I would give anything to stop this." Those words became the beginning of a legend. Across the galaxy, news traveled fast. The Queen's distress signal, a coded transmission sent through the ancient starwave network, reached thousands of worlds. The message was simple yet unbelievable. "To any being who can stop the crying of the royal heir of Velnara, I will grant one wish. I will grant treasures, kingdoms, even my hand. End this suffering, and I shall give you everything I own." Most who received the message thought it was a trick. Some laughed, others ignored it, but one human didn't. On the human colony ship Aurora's Path, a young engineer named Elias Ward sat alone in the quiet workshop of the lower deck. His hands were covered in grease as he repaired a damaged drone. The ship was heading back to Earth after a long trade mission, and most of the crew were asleep. Then the transmission came through. The words of the alien queen echoed from the speakers, translated into soft human speech. Elias froze. He listened again. The voice sounded strong yet broken, full of grief. He could almost feel her pain between the words. His crewmate Lena peeked through the doorway. "You're still working, Eli?" "What was that noise?" Elias turned the volume down. "Some distress call," he said quietly. "From the Velnaran Empire." She raised an eyebrow. "The Velnarans? Those people don't ask for help. They conquer planets." "I know," Elias replied, wiping his hands. But this didn't sound like a ruler's order. It sounded like a mother. Lena gave him a confused look. "You're not thinking of—" "I am," he said. Before she could stop him, Elias started pulling up maps and coordinates. He found the signal source, a royal world deep in restricted space. Any sane person would stay far away from there. But Elias wasn't thinking about safety. He thought of the voice in that message, the exhaustion and sadness. Something inside him said he couldn't just ignore it. "You're going to get yourself killed," Lena warned. "They'll vaporize you before you even land." "Maybe," he said with a small smile. "But someone has to try." 2 days later, a small human shuttle cut through the misty clouds of Velnara Prime. The royal guards on the ground were stunned to see it. No human had ever dared land here before. The shuttle's door opened and Elias stepped out, tall, thin, wearing a plain engineer's suit stained with oil. The alien soldiers aimed their glowing weapons at him. "I come in peace," Elias shouted, raising his hands. "I heard the Queen's call. I'm here to help." The guards looked at each other in disbelief. One whispered, "A human?" They sent a human? Still, the order came from the palace gates. Let him through. When Elias entered the royal hall, the sight took his breath away. The walls shimmered like living crystal, and the air smelled faintly of ozone. Hundreds of alien nobles stood in silence, their skin reflecting strange colors. At the far end sat Queen Serylith on her throne, tall, regal, her hair like flowing metal, her eyes sharp yet tired. For a long moment she said nothing. Then in a calm but cold voice she asked, "You are human?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Elias replied, bowing slightly. Her gaze hardened. "You are far from your world. Do you understand who you speak to?" "I do," he said softly. "You're a mother in pain," the court gasped. No one had ever dared speak to the Queen like that. But Sarilith didn't strike him. Her expression flickered for just a second. Surprise, maybe even respect. "You heard my call?" she said at last. "Then you know my vow. Stop my child's endless crying, and you may ask for any reward, and even my hand if that is what you wish." Elias blinked. He hadn't expected that part to be real. I only came to help," he said. "I want nothing." The Queen's silver eyes studied him for a long time. Then she rose and gestured. "Come, human. Let us see what your kind can do." They entered the royal nursery, a glowing room filled with machines and soft lights. The baby, small and wrapped in golden cloth, lay in a floating cradle. The child's skin shimmered faintly like moonlight, and two tiny eyes blinked up at the ceiling, crying again and again. Elias moved closer. The sound was painful, almost like energy waves shaking the air. He could feel it in his bones. "Careful," one healer warned. "Even our strongest minds cannot stand long near the child." Elias ignored the warning. He knelt beside the cradle and spoke gently. "Hey, little one. It's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The crying slowed for just a moment. Everyone in the room froze. Then it returned, sharper, louder, like the child was trying to say something no one understood. Elias frowned. He looked around the room. His engineer's eyes noticed details others ignored: the glowing emitters in the walls, the steady hum of the life support field, the faint distortion in the air. He turned to the Queen. "These machines, what are they for?" "They maintain air and gravity stability," she said. "The palace rests high above the storm layer. Without them, everything would collapse." Elias walked to one of the emitters and placed his hand on it. The vibration felt uneven. He pulled out a small scanner from his belt, a simple human tool, and checked the readings. "This frequency," he murmured. "It's unstable. It's shaking the air at a pitch only the baby can hear." He turned to the Queen. "Your machines are humming wrong. The vibrations are hurting your child's ears." The healers murmured in disbelief. "Impossible. Our technology is perfect." But Sarilith looked at Elias carefully. For the first time, hope flickered in her eyes. "Can you fix it?" "I can try," he said. He pulled open a small toolkit filled with metal tools and old human ones, nothing fancy. The alien stared as he started to adjust the emitter manually, humming softly as he worked. His hands moved with calm precision, the way only an engineer who cared about his work could move. As he worked, he spoke quietly to the baby. "You're strong, aren't you? Just hang in there, okay? I'll make it stop soon." The Queen watched silently. There was something strange about this human, something gentle yet powerful. No alien had dared speak so kindly to her child. Minutes passed. The tools clicked softly. Then at last the emitter gave a soft tone and the air around them settled. The crying slowed, then stopped. Silence filled the room, deep and pure. The baby looked around, blinking in surprise, and made a small sound. Not a cry, but a laugh. Queen Sarilith froze. For the first time in weeks, her palace was quiet. The sound of her child's laughter filled her heart with warmth she thought she'd never feel again. Elias sighed with relief and smiled. "There, that's better." He looked up and saw the Queen staring at him, her eyes wide, tears beginning to fall. No one in the palace had ever seen their queen cry. In that moment, a bond was born, between a desperate alien mother and a human who listened when no one else did. The sound of peace filled the royal palace for the first time in many weeks. The crying that had shaken walls and hearts was gone. The air itself felt lighter. Queen Sarilith stood still, her eyes fixed on her child, who now slept quietly in the golden cradle. The once tired look on her face softened into something no one had seen before: a mother's smile. Around her, the court healers and guards remained speechless. None of them could believe it. One of the royal healers finally spoke, his voice shaking. How did he do that? That human didn't even use our instruments," another whispered. "He touched the emitters with his hands, just hands, not even shielded." Queen Saralith slowly turned toward Elias, who was still kneeling near the cradle checking the readings on his small human scanner. His hair was messy, his clothes dusty, but his eyes were calm and bright. When he noticed her watching, he smiled. Looks like that did the trick. For a long moment, the Queen said nothing. The silence was heavy, but not with anger. It was full of awe and confusion. "You fixed what none of my people could," she said softly. "How?" Elias shrugged. "It wasn't magic. Just a small vibration problem. Your machines are amazing, but the frequency was off by a few hertz. It hurt the baby's hearing. I just tuned it back." The Queen's silver eyes narrowed slightly, but her voice held respect. "You listened when no one else could." Elias stood up slowly. "Sometimes machines talk," he said with a little smile. "You just need to know how to listen." The Queen took a deep breath, still watching her child. The baby slept peacefully, a soft smile on its tiny face. "For that," she said quietly, "you have my eternal gratitude." Before Elias could respond, the doors of the nursery burst open. Several members of the Royal Council entered, tall, proud aliens dressed in shimmering robes. Their leader, Lord Veyron, bowed deeply before the Queen, but his sharp eyes turned to Elias with suspicion. "Your Majesty," Veyron said, his tone respectful but cold. We felt the silence across the palace. "Has the young heir's crying truly ceased?" "It has," the Queen answered simply. The councillors gasped. One of them asked, "Was it our healers?" "The energy dampeners?" Saralith shook her head. Her gaze shifted to Elias. "No, it was the human." Murmurs spread through the hall instantly. Some voices rose in disbelief, others in fear. "A human? Impossible! Primitive species. He must have tampered with the royal equipment." Elias frowned, stepping back a little. "Hey, I didn't do anything wrong. I was trying to help." Lord Veyron's eyes glowed faintly with distrust. "Your Majesty, this creature cannot be trusted. It is said humans are reckless, unpredictable beings. He could have endangered the heir." Queen Saralith's voice hardened. "Silence, Lord Veyron. You were given weeks and failed. He was given minutes and succeeded." The court fell quiet. Elias looked uncomfortable. He didn't want to cause trouble, but he also didn't like being called a creature. He scratched the back of his neck and said softly, "I didn't mean to offend anyone. I just heard your call. I couldn't ignore it." The Queen studied him again. "You acted out of kindness. That is rare among the stars." One of the councillors whispered something, and Saralith caught it. "Or foolishness." She ignored it. Later that evening, the Queen summoned Elias to the great throne chamber. It was vast and beautiful, built from living crystal that glowed from within. The ceiling looked like a starfield, each light representing a conquered world. Elias walked nervously down the long carpet of silver light. Every alien eye in the room followed him. He reached the base of the throne and bowed slightly. Queen Saralith looked down at him, her expression unreadable. "Human, you have done what no one else could. I made a vow in my message. Do you remember what it was?" Elias hesitated. "You said whoever stops the crying of your child could ask for any reward." Her eyes narrowed. "Even my hand." A quiet murmur swept across the court. Elias felt his face heat up. "Your Majesty, I didn't come for that. I just wanted to help." Saralith's voice was calm but firm. "I am bound by my word. Name your reward." Elias shook his head. "I don't want anything. Not power, not wealth. I just want to go home safe." "That's enough." The court went silent again. Even the wind outside seemed to pause. Queen Saralith leaned back on her throne. There was curiosity in her gaze, but also respect. "You refuse riches and power?" "Yes, Your Majesty." "And marriage to the Queen of Velnara?" Elias almost laughed. "I think your people would be very unhappy if you married a mechanic from a small blue planet." Some of the guards chuckled quietly. For the first time in months, even the Queen's lips curved into a faint smile. "You are brave," she said. "Or foolish." "Maybe both," Elias replied. When the court session ended, Saralith dismissed everyone except Elias. The vast chamber grew quiet again. The Queen stood from her throne and walked toward him. Without her crown, she seemed less like a ruler and more like a woman tired from too many sleepless nights. "You fixed a machine," she said softly. "But you also gave my heart peace. My people will talk for many days about this human who did what none could." Elias bowed his head. Anyone would have tried, Your Majesty. Her eyes softened. No, many heard my message. Only you came. That truth sank deep in the Queen's heart. For all her empire's power, not one of her allies had answered her call, but this human, alone with no army, no reason, no reward, had crossed the stars just to help. I will not forget this, Sarilith said quietly. Your kind is strange, Elias Ward. You act without promise of gain. Sometimes, he said, doing what's right is enough. The Queen stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand the human way of thinking. Then she said, Rest. My servants will prepare quarters for you. Tomorrow the council will speak of what happens next. Elias nodded. Thank you, Your Majesty. As he turned to leave, he heard her voice again, softer this time. Elias, he stopped. You are not a subject of Velnara, she said. But tonight you are its greatest ally. That night, as Elias lay on a soft bed of glowing fabric, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the child's small glowing eyes and the Queen's quiet, broken expression when she saw her baby finally at peace. He wasn't sure what would happen next. The council clearly didn't trust him. The Queen was mysterious, powerful, and kind, yet guarded. But somewhere in his heart he felt that he was meant to be there. Outside, the twin moons of Velnara rose high, painting the crystal towers in silver light. The palace looked peaceful now. Far away in her private chamber, Queen Sarilith stood by the cradle once again, watching her child sleep. She touched the baby's tiny hand and whispered, He saved you, little one. A man from a faraway world. The baby made a small sound, almost like a giggle. The Queen smiled. For the first time in her long reign, she felt something new, hope. But then a faint knock came at her door. A messenger entered, bowing deeply. Your Majesty, urgent message from the Galactic Council. They have heard of today's events. Sarilith's expression hardened again. Of course they have. The messenger hesitated. They demand that you send the human away at once. They say his presence is dangerous and will harm your reputation. The Queen looked down at her child, sleeping peacefully, then turned toward the dark horizon beyond the palace. Her voice was quiet but filled with resolve. Let them talk. I decide what happens in my kingdom. While the stars shone quietly outside, two very different hearts, one human and one alien, began to walk a path that would change both their worlds forever. The Empire whispered about the strange visitor. Some called him a hero, others called him a fool, but to Queen Sarilith he was something else entirely. A reminder that even in a galaxy full of cold machines and endless wars, kindness could still bring light. The next morning, the first rays of Velnara's twin suns broke through the mist that hung around the floating palace. The world below shimmered in pale light, and the golden towers reflected the sunrise like flames in the sky. Inside, Elias Ward woke up slowly, blinking against the soft glow of his room. The walls hummed quietly, alive with energy. The bed had been too comfortable to be real. He had slept well, the first peaceful sleep he'd had in months. He stretched and looked out through the transparent wall. From his window he could see the palace gardens, filled with glowing flowers that floated above the ground. Strange creatures moved gracefully among them. He smiled to himself. I really am in another world, he whispered. Before he could enjoy the view any longer, the door slid open with a gentle chime. A tall alien attendant bowed and said, The Queen requests your presence in the royal nursery. Elias nodded and followed. When he entered the nursery, the sight warmed his heart. Queen Sarilith was sitting near the cradle, gently holding her child. The little one was awake but calm, tiny hands playing with a soft ball of light that floated in the air. The Queen looked up when she saw Elias. You are awake, she said. Yes, Your Majesty, Elias replied, bowing slightly. How's the little one? Her voice softened. Peaceful. No crying through the night. It feels strange, Elias smiled. That's a good kind of strange. The Queen actually smiled back, just a little. The healers confirmed your explanation. The vibration field was indeed causing pain. They recalibrated the entire palace system based on your readings. That's good, Elias said. Now everyone can rest easy. Sarilith tilted her head, her metallic hair catching the morning light. You speak as if you are responsible for everyone here. Elias scratched his neck awkwardly. Well, maybe a little. Crying babies can affect everyone around, no matter the species. The Queen studied him for a moment longer, as if trying to understand the human way of thinking. Then she said quietly, "You care for a child that is not your own. That is rare among rulers and strangers alike," he shrugged. "You don't need to be related to care." For a moment their eyes met, human warmth against alien grace, and something gentle passed between them. That calm moment was broken when the door opened sharply. Lord Veyron, head of the Royal Council, entered with a few guards. His expression was as cold as the steel patterns on his armor. "Your Majesty," he said firmly, "the Galactic Council demands your immediate response. They are displeased about the humans' continued presence." Saralith's expression hardened. "They may be displeased, but they are not my masters." Veyron frowned. "Forgive me, my queen, but this is not only about pride. They claim the humans' technology could be dangerous. They fear it might influence the young heir or spread unknown ideas." Elias stepped forward slightly. "Unknown ideas? You mean common sense?" Veyron glared at him. "You will speak when spoken to, human." Before Elias could reply, Saralith rose to her full height. Her silver armor caught the sunlight like a mirror. "Enough," she said, her voice calm but strong. "Elias Ward is under my protection. He came when no one else did. He saved my child when all of you failed. That is the end of this discussion." The room fell silent. Lord Veyron bowed stiffly, his face tight with anger. "As you command, my queen." He turned sharply and left, his boots echoing down the corridor. Elias looked uncomfortable. "I didn't mean to cause trouble. Maybe it's better if I leave before things get worse," but Saralith shook her head. "If you leave, the council will think they can command me. I will not give them that power." Elias didn't know what to say. He had never met anyone who spoke with such quiet strength. Over the next few days, Elias was allowed to explore the palace. He helped the engineers fine-tune the palace systems, teaching them simple but effective methods humans used on starships. Though the aliens first doubted him, they soon realized his strange human logic worked. He used simple tools, strange jokes, and a calm voice that made even the youngest palace workers feel at ease. Wherever he went, the atmosphere became lighter. Even the royal child seemed to recognize him. Whenever Elias entered the nursery, the baby reached out toward him and smiled. The queen noticed this with quiet amusement. "You have a strange effect on my child," she said one day. Elias laughed. "Maybe babies just like people who make funny faces." "You make faces?" the queen asked, confused. He grinned and crossed his eyes, puffing his cheeks like a balloon. The queen blinked, unsure how to react, until the baby burst into cheerful giggles. When Saralith finally understood, she covered her mouth to hide a smile. "You are unlike anyone I have met, Elias Ward." "Humans are full of surprises," he said proudly. But outside the palace walls, whispers spread. Across the Velnaran Empire, nobles and generals questioned their ruler's decision. "The queen trusts a human. A primitive creature dares walk in our sacred halls. If he wins her favor, what will happen to us?" The Galactic Council, made up of alien leaders from different species, grew restless. They saw danger in the Queen's growing respect for the human. To them, humanity was still new to the stars. Clever, but unpredictable. The thought of a human standing beside one of the most powerful rulers in the galaxy was enough to make them nervous. And so, they sent a message. One evening, as Elias was studying a strange piece of Velnaran technology, the Queen entered the workshop holding a glowing crystal tablet. Her face was calm, but her tone was sharp. "The Council has spoken," she said. "They demand your removal within one solar cycle. They call you a threat to political stability." Elias sighed. "That was fast. They also warn," she continued, "that if I do not obey, they will consider my empire in violation of the peace accords." He frowned. "That sounds like they're looking for an excuse." "Yes," she said softly. "And I will not give them one. But I will not send you away either." "Your Majesty," Elias began, "I don't want to be the reason your empire faces trouble." Saralith looked at him directly. "You are not the trouble. Their fear is." Elias hesitated. "Maybe. But if it puts your people in danger..." Her voice interrupted him, calm but unyielding. "Elias, when my child cried, the stars were silent. None of my allies came. Only you did. I will not betray that trust now." He looked at her, unsure what to say. There was no pride in her words, and only honesty, For a long moment neither spoke. Then the queen added softly, "You should be proud of what you have done. You brought peace not through power, but through understanding. That is something even rulers forget." Elias nodded slowly. "Thank you, Your Majesty." That night, Elias stood on a balcony overlooking the endless clouds of Velnara. The twin moons rose again, their light shining over the world like two silver eyes. He thought about his small home back on Earth, the quiet workshop, the laughter of friends. He missed them, but something inside told him he was meant to be here. Behind him, footsteps approached softly. The queen stood there, her royal robe shimmering faintly in the moonlight. "You cannot sleep?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "Too much on my mind." "I understand," she said, walking beside him. "When I was crowned, I thought ruling was about power, but I see now it is about protecting hearts. My child's, my people's, even yours." Elias smiled faintly. "That's a heavy responsibility." "Yes," she said quietly, "but worth it." They stood together in silence, watching the stars. Somewhere above, the Galactic Council plotted their next move. But here, under the twin moons, a fragile friendship, maybe something deeper, was forming between a human engineer and a queen of another world. The baby's soft laughter echoed through the halls once again. Not in pain this time, but in joy. And across the galaxy, stories began to spread. Stories of the human who healed the royal child and earned the heart of an alien queen. It was only the beginning.
Days had passed since Elias Ward had first calmed the royal air of Velnara. The palace was quiet now, the halls no longer echoing with the desperate cries that had haunted the queen for so long.
Yet peace brought new challenges. The Galactic Council, which oversaw alliances between thousands of worlds, had become increasingly restless. News of a human being in the heart of the Velnaran Empire had reached their ears. Many called it reckless, others called it dangerous. Some even whispered that this single human could change the balance of power in the galaxy. But Queen Saralith did not care. She paced her throne room, her metallic hair catching the sunlight streaming through the crystal walls. Her child slept in a floating cradle beside the throne, tiny hands moving in dreams. Even in rest, the baby seemed to radiate life, proof of the queen's victory over her own worry. Elias stood at the edge of the room, unsure why he had been summoned so suddenly. He had expected the council to demand his immediate removal, yet he had been allowed to stay. For now. "Elias Ward," the queen began, her voice calm yet commanding. "The council is unhappy with your presence." He nodded. "I understand. They see me as a stranger in their empire." She smiled faintly. "A stranger, perhaps, but you are not just a stranger. You are the one who brought peace to my child when no one else could. That cannot be ignored." Elias looked down, unsure how to respond. "I only did what I could, Your Majesty. I never wanted attention." "Attention is not always what matters," she said, stepping closer. "Sometimes it is the courage to act even when no one expects it that changes everything." He blinked. "I don't understand." Saralith's silver eyes softened. "You do not need to understand yet. But you will see. Actions speak louder than titles and deeds stronger than orders. That is why you are here, Elias. That is why I speak now in front of everyone." She turned toward the chamber doors. The royal guards bowed as she gestured. "Bring the counselors." Moments later, the most powerful leaders of Velnara entered. Each was dressed in ceremonial robes, their skin shimmering in the light, their eyes glowing with authority. They whispered among themselves, eyes flicking to Elias. Many had hoped he would be gone by now. The queen's voice rang out, firm and clear. "Counselors of Velnara, hear my words. This human, Elias Ward, is no ordinary visitor. He crossed the stars alone, entered my palace without fear, and calmed my child when all of you failed. His courage and skill have proven greater than titles or bloodlines." A murmur of disbelief swept the room. Some counselors raised their heads in shock. Others exchanged worried glances. One of the older counselors, Lord Varen, stepped forward, his voice sharp. "Your Majesty, with respect, this is unprecedented. A human has no place in the affairs of our empire. Your decree cannot ignore protocol." The queen's eyes flashed. "Protocol? Protocol is meaningless when a child suffers. You know this, and yet you did nothing. This human acted when you could not. Do you understand what that means?" Varen's face tightened, but he said nothing. The queen turned to Elias. "Human, step forward." Elias swallowed hard and obeyed. The room seemed to hold its breath. He was small among the towering aliens, his clothes simple, his hands still carrying traces of work from the nursery. Queen Saralith looked directly at him. "You have my gratitude beyond words, and because I am bound by my vow, I now make a choice that will surprise all who doubt me." A tense silence filled the chamber. The baby stirred in its cradle, tiny eyes opening to gaze at the human standing nearby. Saralith spoke clearly, deliberately. "Elias Ward, I offered a reward to the one who could end my child's cries. Today I honor that promise. I offer you my hand in marriage." The chamber erupted in gasps. Guards blinked in shock. Counselors whispered frantically. Many shook their heads in disbelief. Elias froze. He could not believe he had heard correctly. "Your Majesty, I never asked for—" "I know," Saralith interrupted softly, yet her tone was firm. "I did not expect you to ask for my hand, but my promise was clear. You acted without expectation. You deserve the choice." Elias shook his head, voice trembling slightly. I cannot. I am a simple human. I have no title, no claim, no power to offer." The Queen stepped closer, her presence calm yet unyielding. "Titles do not define a person. Courage, honesty, and kindness do. You have all of these and more. That is why I offer this to you, not as a ruler to a subject, but as a mother to the one who saved her child." Veyron's jaw tightened. "Your Majesty, this is folly. The Council will not allow this." "Let them speak," Saralith said, her silver eyes blazing. "I will not retract my word. The human saved my heir. He is my choice, not yours." Elias looked around the room, feeling the weight of the moment. Every eye was on him, some with disbelief, others with admiration. He shook his head, trying to gather his thoughts. "Your Majesty," he said finally, his voice quiet but firm. "I never expected such a reward. I came only to help." "That was enough for me," Saralith smiled softly. "Sometimes the reward chooses the person, not the other way around." The counselors whispered furiously. Some bowed, others turned pale. This was more than a political statement. It was a declaration that the Queen's word and her promise to her child were above all else. One of the younger counselors dared to speak. "But as Your Majesty, a human cannot rule. He is untested in our ways." "You are right," the Queen said calmly. "He does not rule, nor does he need to. His strength is in his heart and his wisdom is in his deeds. That is enough for now. The Empire will learn that strength comes in many forms." Veyron's face was tight with anger. "Your Majesty, only silence," she commanded. "You will accept this, or leave." The counselors exchanged looks, realizing they had no choice. Saralith's word was law and her power unchallenged. Slowly they bowed their heads in reluctant respect. The Queen turned to Elias once more. "Do not fear what others may think. Your actions have proven your worth. My empire will see your courage and they will learn to respect you as I do." Elias felt his chest tighten. The Queen's confidence, her calm authority, and the quiet strength in her voice made him feel both honored and humbled. I will do my best," he said finally. "That is all I ask," she replied. Later that day, Elias wandered through the palace gardens. The glowing flowers seemed brighter, the air lighter. He thought about the Queen's words and the bold choice she had made. He had not expected this, yet somehow he felt a quiet certainty, a sense that he had found a place where he truly belonged, at least for now. He stopped at the edge of a crystal fountain, watching the water float in slow, shimmering arcs. In the distance, the palace towers gleamed, and somewhere inside, the baby laughed quietly. For the first time in his life, Elias felt that small acts of kindness could truly change worlds. The Queen had seen that in him, and in return she had chosen to trust him and offer him more than he had ever imagined. Across the stars, whispers began. Stories spread of the human who calmed the royal air and earned the Queen's hand in recognition of his courage. Some called it madness, others called it legend, but for Elias, it was a new beginning. The stars outside Velnara seemed to shine a little brighter that night, as if approving the bond forming between two very different beings, a human from a distant blue world, and the queen of one of the galaxy's mightiest empires, had begun a journey together, not for conquest, not for power, but for understanding, trust, and the courage to act when it mattered most. And somewhere in the palace, the royal child slept peacefully, unaware that their first laugh had begun a story that would echo across the galaxy. The halls of Velnara's palace had never been quieter or more peaceful. The royal child slept soundly, and the human who had calmed the baby now moved easily among the nobles and guards. Earning respect in ways no one could have predicted, Elias Ward had become more than a visitor. Though he wore no armor, carried no title, and had no claim to the throne, he had proven himself trustworthy, skilled, and kind. The Queen had allowed him to stay, and slowly, even the most skeptical counselors had begun to see that his presence was not a threat, but a blessing. In the nursery, Elias spent long hours observing the child. He learned its tiny habits, the subtle ways it communicated, and the small signals that indicated when the baby was hungry, tired, or restless. Queen Saralith often joined him. She would stand quietly in the doorway, watching him work with gentle patience. Sometimes she would speak softly to the child, telling it stories of distant stars, of battles fought and won, and of planets yet to be explored. Elias admired her strength. She ruled an empire, yet she was also a mother, tender and careful. He had never met someone so powerful yet so human in their emotions. "You have a way with the child," Saralith said one day. Elias shrugged. "I just pay attention. Babies, they notice when someone cares." Saralith's eyes softened. "I see that now. My child does not fear you, and neither do I." "I'm glad," he replied, smiling faintly. Outside the nursery, whispers continued. Many nobles could not believe that a human had earned the Queen's trust. Some still questioned his presence. But as weeks passed, even the skeptics had to admit that nothing harmful had come from Elias. The palace itself became more efficient. Small problems with energy grids and floating walkways were fixed quickly. Strange but simple human ideas improved life for all the inhabitants, from the youngest palace workers to the guards on duty. Even the Galactic Council had begun to reconsider. They could not deny the peace and happiness that Elias brought. Reports came back that the child was thriving. The palace systems were stable, and the Queen herself seemed lighter, more confident. One day, a grand assembly was called in the main hall. The largest room in the palace, the hall gleamed with crystal and light. Counselors, nobles, and representatives from allied worlds gathered. Elias was invited to stand beside Queen Saralith, a human at the heart of a galaxy that had never seen one so close to power. The murmurs began immediately. "Why is he here?" "A human." "Beside the Queen? Has she lost her mind?" Saralith's voice rang through the hall. "Quiet. Today is not about doubt. It is about recognition. Recognition of courage, understanding, and action." She turned to Elias. "You heard my call and acted when no one else would. You calmed my child, and in doing so you calmed this palace and my heart. Today, I ask all of you to recognize him as a friend to Velnara and a guide to its future." The counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Some bowed, some hesitated, and some whispered, but none dared argue openly. Elias stepped forward, feeling the weight of all eyes upon him. He looked at the Queen, then at the council. "I am no ruler," he said, his voice calm. "I am a visitor, a mechanic, and a human. I came to help, not to lead. But I will stay if my presence brings peace and guidance where it is needed." Saralith nodded. "That is all I ask." The murmurs died down as the council began to accept him, slowly, carefully. Elias had not demanded respect, yet it had been earned by his actions. Over the following months, Elias worked closely with the Queen and her advisors. He helped organize the palace systems, improve communication between planets, and ensure the child's safety. His human perspective often solved problems in ways Velnarans had never considered. The Queen began to rely on him, not just as a helper, but as a partner. They spent long hours together, discussing strategies, reviewing reports, and sharing stories of distant worlds. With each passing day, their bond grew stronger. Sometimes they would simply walk through the palace gardens, watching the floating flowers and strange creatures. The child often followed in a tiny floating cradle, giggling as it swayed in the air. "You are very different from anyone I have known," Saralith said one afternoon. "I hear that a lot." Elias replied with a smile. "No," she said, her eyes serious. "You think differently. You act differently, and yet you see what is important, not what is expected." Elias felt warmth in his chest. "I guess that's what humans do. We see people, not just titles or ranks." Saralith nodded, a small smile crossing her face. "Yes, and that is why you are here. Not for power, not for reward, but for understanding." Time passed. The child grew stronger and more playful, laughing freely, exploring the nursery, and learning from both the Queen and Elias. The palace halls echoed not with cries of worry, but with laughter and joy. The Galactic Council eventually sent observers to Velnara. They watched the human closely, expecting mistakes or accidents. But what they found was a calm, clever, and reliable presence. Slowly, their fears melted. Stories began to spread across the galaxy. Tales of the human who calmed the royal air and earned the trust of a mighty queen became legend. Some called it miraculous, others called it wisdom, but all agreed it was unprecedented. Elias did not care for stories. He cared for the queen, her child, and the peace he had helped create. One evening, in the quiet of the nursery, the queen sat beside Elias as the child slept. "You have changed this palace," she said softly. "I didn't do it alone," he replied. "You gave me the chance." Saralith's silver eyes met his. "And yet, the child trusts you completely. That is rare even for me. You have earned something that cannot be taught or bought. True trust." Elias felt a lump in his throat. I just wanted to help." "And help you did," she said, her voice tender. "More than anyone could imagine." The queen looked down at her child and then back at Elias. "I once promised that whoever calmed my child could ask for any reward. You did not ask. You only acted, but now, perhaps one day you will understand what that reward truly means." Elias nodded slowly, unsure what to say. "Do you feel at home here?" she asked quietly. "I do," he admitted. "More than I ever thought I could." Saralith smiled faintly. "Then you belong here, Elias. Not because of titles, not because of promises, but because of who you are." The days turned into months, and life in Velnara flourished. The human and the queen became inseparable in purpose and respect. The palace thrived, the empire grew stronger, and the child's laughter became a symbol of hope for the galaxy. Elias had no need for titles. He had no need for power. What mattered was trust, understanding, and the courage to act, and in the heart of a mighty alien empire, he had found all of these, and a family he never expected. As the twin moons rose over Velnara once again, the queen and the human stood side by side on the palace balcony, watching the stars. The child slept peacefully in the nursery, a tiny smile on its face. Saralith spoke softly, almost to herself. "You came when no one else did. You stayed when others would have left. And because of that, everything is different now," Elias smiled. "I just did what I could." "No," she said firmly, taking his hand. "You did more than you know. You changed my world, and maybe the galaxy itself." And for the first time, Elias truly understood. It was not power, not wealth, not title. It was courage, kindness, and trust that could move stars. In the palace of Velnara, a human had found a place among the stars. A queen had found an ally she could rely on, and a child had found peace. Together they had begun a story that would echo across the galaxy, a story of courage, trust, and the quiet power of humanity. The stars shone brightly that night, as if the universe itself was smiling,